Welcome back to the Context Coaching Podcast. We are joined today by Micheline, aka Michie LeMay, who is the Junior Alpine Program Director at Mount Mansfield in Vermont. She is our first ski and alpine coach. We're going to see what we can learn about that, and also primarily coaches younger athletes. So I'm fascinated by what I can steal that works for more novice peeps. So, Coach, thanks for being on today.
Thank you so much for having me, Justin.
All right, so we're going to dive in as usual. Why don't you take us through your background? How'd you get into coaching, number one? What was the process like for that first job, and then any pivots and shifts along the way that you have encountered?
Yeah, so when I was a senior in college at the University of New Hampshire, I was a racer for them on their Alpine team. I got cut my senior year and I was very sad about it. So I didn't want to just stop being involved in the sport. So from that moment of being cut, I literally the next day reached out to the ski club that I went as a child, which was called the Gunstock Ski Club in Guilford, New Hampshire. I reached out to them and asked if they wanted any coaches. So I literally the next weekend just started coaching there for the rest of that winter. So that's how I got started. And I just loved working with kids, obviously. And I loved being involved in the sport. I love skiing. So I love sharing that passion to others. So after college, I moved out to Colorado to live the ski bum lifestyle. I lived in Breckenridge, Colorado. I loved it. I was a bellhop there, so I can't really say that I was a coach, but in the summers I worked at the Keystone Science School, working with children. And then when I moved back to Vermont, I moved back to Vermont because I wanted to be closer to my family in New Hampshire, but be at a bigger mountain. So that's how I ended up in Stowe, Vermont. And I literally just walked into the ski academy and asked if they needed coaches and teachers. And I started working here and I've been coaching ever since here. So I've been here for almost 23 years.
That's a long time in one place. Talk a little bit about opportunities that you have passed on during that time and why you continue to pour your energy into the program you're in.
That's a great question, actually. Started out here after about 4 years of working here. So I started out working with older athletes, which involved a little bit more travel. And I was teaching health and science at the academy. After 4 years, that's when I had met my husband, who also was working here. At that time, I also transitioned to working with the younger athletes. The both of us, we got married, we had children. Stowe is a beautiful place to raise a family. And obviously, our children naturally got into the sport. All along, I've just been coaching that age group, and both of my children have gone through it at this point. So they're 16 and 14. And I love it so much. I love that age group because they want to have a lot of fun and they still like listen. They want to take your advice. And I definitely very much connect to the younger child. I work with the middle and high school students teaching mindfulness at the academy, but as far as coaching goes, I like the like wonder in their eyes and the excitement when it snows and helping them through some of those first competitive experiences. So as far as passing things up, yes, as me and my husband runs the whole organization. So between the two of us, we have been sought after from other organizations. When push came to shove and after we peeled down all the layers of the onion, it always came down to being closer to and still being able to do what I loved, but go home for the holidays and be there at any moment if I needed to. And then just obviously as the kids developed friendships and watching them to have the opportunity to be in this program, we've just turned everything else down up till now.
So I want to talk about this challenge you just accomplished, which is 1 million vertical human powered feet on Mount Mansfield. And that's a mouthful, and I don't know what it means, but I would love to know what it means, why you did it, what prompted you to do that, what are some of the things you've overcome in your life that set that as a goal for you?
Yes, for the year of 2024, my goal was to do 1 million human powered vertical feet up Mount Mansfield. So what that entails is only counting the up. And Mount Mansfield is the highest mountain in Vermont. And there's an app called Strava that I use a lot, and it helps calculate all of this stuff. So that was very helpful to have in this process. But essentially, what I did was I hiked, skinned, which is uphill skiing, and mountain biked on Mount Mansfield a million vertical feet. So I did accomplish the goal. I accomplished it at the end of November, which was awesome to do before I began my very busy season of coaching. So I hiked about 400,000 feet, which is about 200 times up the mountain. I uphill skied or skinned about 400,000 feet, and I mountain biked about 200,000 feet. And the mountain biking is much more challenging to get that vertical than the hiking or skinning. I also have a family and I work full time. So trying to find the time to fit in, it was about 2 to 3 hours a day to be able to accomplish the goal. So doing that on top of working, and it was a lot. Like I'd have to get up at 4:30 in the morning, but I did it and it was really exciting. And how did I get to the point of wanting to do something like this? Yes, it is a crazy challenge. I've had some hurdles in my life, as we all have, and I don't think that mine are much more extraordinary than others, but they were things that really helped me develop my love of the outdoors, the gratitude for my healthy body and moving, and like wanting to take on something with so much perseverance and grit. But I guess like the long and short of the story is I've had 5 knee surgeries, 3 ACLs through my times, and mostly as a coach, not as an athlete. I've dislocated my shoulder with a torn labrum, and so it just comes out all the time. So I've had 18 dislocations, and I just have to throw that thing back in on a dime, which is, if anyone's had to go through that, it's very uncomfortable. And then most recently, I was diagnosed with triple negative breast cancer, so I had to go through chemotherapy and radiation and surgery, and that was 3 years ago. So this third year was my third year of coming back, and I never stopped working or doing the things that I loved, but I guess I felt this extra itch to prove to myself that I was back to my healthy, full boat Mishi. So I got this idea to do the uphill challenge, and at first I was doing it anywhere, and then as the year went on, I thought it would be really fun and exciting to do it on my home mountain right here on Mount Mansfield. So I ended up having to do about 120,000 more feet that I had done other places to tag on to make it all on Mount Mansfield. And I'm still going.
You would hope part of the takeaway from challenges like that is that it embeds, I want to say a habit, but a pattern and routine that you stick to, right? It's not, I'm done, I'm never doing it again. Like when I did the 4:48 David Goggins thing, and that's the last time I ran. I'm never running again. That's not what you're hoping for out of this. How would you say that your journey and the things that you just mentioned, the challenges that you have faced along the way, informs your approach to coaching?
I think it comes down to just how much I love mindfulness and mindset and sharing that with others. And obviously, a lot of these kids joined me for a lot of these adventures because I run a summer camp and we would go hiking on Mondays and mountain biking on Tuesdays. And they were with me on this journey, which was really exciting. Um, and I guess I would say, as far as like how it has helped my approach to coaching, obviously, what I'm hoping to is instill these habits and then instill I talk a lot about self-care and like doing things for ourselves, being out in nature, moving our bodies, being active. And I hope to instill like inspiration and like understanding in the kids' eyes. And actually last weekend I did a speech in front of all of the kids at the ski club and all the parents. And it was really moving. Like I actually hadn't like prepared too much for it, but as I started talking and sharing, it was real. Like I looked out on the out in the audience and I was just like, wow, like this whole community was with me through a lot of this. And I guess what I hope is that they know that is something that can be done, and like having perseverance and grit. And I did a lot of it for others. I did a huge thing for fundraising for breast cancer awareness and different charities in town. So I tried to make the most of the whole experience. So I guess just like showing kids that these types of things can be done.
Take us back to the beginning when you pivoted from being an athlete to an instructor. What was that like? What did you learn despite having all this experience that teaching and coaching was a different beast altogether?
Yeah, it sure is. Obviously, trying to find the way to connect to the other athletes is definitely the biggest difference between being an athlete and being a coach, right? Honing in on that practice and being able to connect with them. And each child learns differently. Each child connects to something differently. So, really trying to be able to work with the individual human and child to be able to connect with them in a way for them to understand the concepts or what you're trying to teach them.
And as you prod and try to figure out what lands for different athletes, what's the most significant aha moment you've had lately, even after 20 years of doing the same thing, where it just hits you and you're like, oh, wow, I haven't thought of this before. Let me try to start doing X.
Biggest aha moment. I think, as we know, children learn differently. So if it's like visually or tactily or um, verbally. So I think it's just a matter of like when they don't get it one way, being able to try it another way is definitely it's like a practice, right? And obviously it's like something that I've gained over my years of experience on how to do that. Um, One thing that I do in my program that is different than many other Alpine programs is that I mix up the groups of kids. Like I have 175 athletes that I'm managing every weekend, and mixing up the groups and the coach staff has this varying perspective. A lot of parents want the kid with one coach the whole time so that they like can get to know their ins and outs, where I find it to be very beneficial for kids to be meeting different coaches and working with different types of coaches, because I find that's how I can hit every kid the most. Like the coaches have different styles, they have different ways of demonstrating things and talking about things. So I find that to be a really effective method and one that I really pride the program on. So when I like talk to prospective parents, I do really highlight that. And I also like to have the ability to switch up the group so that some kids are like little cliques will start to form or like social issues. So then I can like behind the scenes manage that in a way that is helpful for the coaches and the athletes. But as far as one recently, it's just like every day there's things that happen to me that I'm learning from these kids. But I find like recently, I'll give an example. We have different drills that we do with the kids to work on these fundamental skills. And I find it super helpful to make funny names or like memorable names for the drill. So it's not just like the common name that we would have in the industry. So just like the other day, we were like, oh, like saying the common name. I'm like, no, let's try to come up with this like funny name for it. And then so when you like describe it to the kids, they're all like, yay, that's awesome. And then they do it so much easier. So just the reminder that how effective that can be, and also to not take it for granted. Don't just let it go because it's more work to try to figure out, taking the time to do that and find a way to make it fun and connected.
Yeah, I think that speaks to the power of messaging and creating sticky messages that then allow you to potentially spend less having to re-instruct the activity every time because it's like, we're going to do X, whatever that happens to be, the name you've come up with. How have you found the transferability from the, let's say, 7-year-olds to the 11-year-olds or your own children that are now teenagers? In the way in which you have to approach instruction with each age group.
Obviously, a lot of it has to do with the verbiage and like the technical words that are used. What a lot of these kids I get from 7 to 11, and then they move on to the other age groups. So obviously, we have discussions amongst our staff about the transfer of these drills all the way through. What I'm basically doing is teaching them the fundamentals of the sport. So like athletic stance, right? Like I start with that and I If I have these kids for 4 or 5 years, we are just revisiting that for the whole month of December, every fourth and fifth year, because that is the foundation. That is the concrete on the house, right? Without that, they are not going to build on any of these other skills that we're trying to teach them. I guess what I would say is like some of the older coaches, they will go back to these other drills. They may not, one of them, just to give the audience a understanding. So like you take your two poles and you hold them in your hands out in front of you, and that helps get your hands up and forward, which also helps get your body forward and balanced in the boot. I call that tray of hot chocolate. So I tell them to hold their poles out and pretend that there's a steaming hot chocolate with marshmallows coming out of the top. And you don't want to spill it, because if you spill it, you're not going to be able to have it when you get to the bottom. And then that helps them visualize holding that even and steady and out in front of them the whole time. So some of the coaches will say, hey, you need to go back and do the tray drill or hand tray of hot chocolate, because so many of the kids know that from when they were little. But obviously, as they're getting older, they're building more and more onto the technique, and they're under more gravity and they're like stronger, and it builds and builds. But it's really those fundamental things are the base of the whole entire sport. So many of the times, if there's an issue with an older athlete, it's about going back and revisiting those foundational skills from back to when they were working with me.
Yeah. No, I think that's in any sport, right? It's what does your foundation look like? Or I think you mentioned it earlier, like the concrete of the house, or if you're trying to take calculus and you don't know how to do algebra, it's going to be a little bit complicated, right? What would you say is the best thing you do in your program that has the largest effect on the culture you're trying to create, right? Where it's if I were to leave tomorrow and go coach soccer, we would do something similar to this because it's so transformational.
I think physically, I would say the athletic stance, positioning, right? That's what I'm trying to get every kid to come out of this program with. And what I also tell the parents is if your kid goes through these 4 years of this junior program, they're going to be able to ski anywhere in the world for the rest of their life, right? Like you're developing a love of sport, you're developing confidence in the sport. As far as my mission goes for my program, I like to say there's three pillars: safety, fun, and fundamentals. If they're not having safe, if they're not being safe, they can't have fun. If they're not being safe and having fun, they can't learn. And though safety and fun comes before learning, right? That's how it's all going to fit. So I pride the program on that, and I hope that is having a ripple effect on all the athletes that I work with. I'm also very big into the social emotional side of the athlete, and through a lot of my life's journeys, I've developed a love of mindfulness and a practice of mindfulness. And again, it's about connecting that to the athlete. So I'm obviously not using like having them sit there and meditate silently for 25 minutes, but I do talk them through little things around having tools in order to get more grounded and get more centered and to be able to handle their nerves and be a kind human being. So though like I would say, what I guess in my 40s now, after doing this for 24 years, what do I want all of these kids that interface with me to walk away with? Obviously, I want them to be a successful athlete, but even more, I want them to be a kind human being with a tool set to emotionally be able to navigate life. So I hope that's my the Mishy's mindfulness mission. That's my website and my Instagram. That is my big that's what I'm trying to ripple out in the world right now.
So, talk a little bit more about that. How do you build that in? What are some techniques you can offer others that are low-hanging fruit where they can have a transformational effect today versus the deeper layers of the onion that have to be peeled? Talk a little bit about the journey there, how it's evolved, what other people can implement super easily, and then like your program and how you do it.
Yeah. You want me to talk about my journey to get to this place, or yeah.
I want you to take that however you feel it serves you and run with it, right? So there's
Okay.
the way in which Mishi applies mindfulness to your athletes, and then there's the way in which I'm a basketball coach right now. And what are a couple of tools that I could go to practice or my game today and utilize to enhance our level of performance?
Okay, great. So when I'm working with the middle and high school, and even I do this with my younger athletes, I have a thing that I call the start routine. And the start routine would be I say that because I'm asking them when they get to the start of the course or on the chairlift up to the start of the course, I want them to use some of these tools. For a basketball player or a lacrosse player or any sport, any athlete, or any human being, actually, you can use some of these tools to help you get more grounded and centered and prepared. So I have a four step start routine, and the first one is breathing. So easily, like when we're anxious or nervous, we hold all of our breath up high in the lung. It's very important to take big deep breaths. With the kids, I say what we're going to do is a 4 2 6 count, and it's in through the nose for 4, hold for 2, out of the mouth for 6. You always want to breathe a little bit longer out. That's what tells your parasympathetic nervous system to actually calm down your body. The other thing that's very important about breath is to bring the breath all the way down to the belly. So like obviously for the little kids, I practice with them filling up their belly and putting their hand on it. If you keep it all up high, it's not going to do the trick for the nervous system. So bring it all the way down. And I say if you can do 3 breaths with 4 2 6, that's going to help get you to a more calmer state, more focused state. The second thing I tell them about is visualizations. Up there on for Alpine racing, obviously they're inspecting the course and they're visualizing the course that they're going to be skiing. This is a little harder for the younger athletes, obviously. They don't really study it like the older athletes do. But for the older athletes, they do put quite a bit of intention into this, but it's not as far as transferring that to any other athlete or any other person. It's just you could even just visualize things that make you happy, right? That's going to take your mind off of whatever emotion that's too big for you right now and bring you back to a happier place. The third thing is what I call positive personal phrases. And this is like my spin off of just affirmations. Like everyone hears, oh, affirmations. I think it's good to personalize it a little bit. So I asked the kids to come up with 3 things that they want to say to themselves before they're about to go down the course. So examples that I give them are I am focused, I am prepared, I am strong, I am ready, I am happy. It could be any of those things, and it could be specific to your sport or specific to what you're trying to do next, but saying those through your mind a few times. And then the fourth thing is just being grateful. And I think we all know, like, when we're in a state of gratitude, we're more grounded and we're more present, right? Like all these things that we're doing are just taking us away from a too big emotion and helping us be more grounded and more present. So and like the other thing I say to them is, okay, you're at the top of a mountain. Like you're trying to think, what are you grateful for? Just look around. Like everything that you're doing right now is like such a super beautiful opportunity. Like your parents have have you enrolled you in this program. You're doing a sport that you love. You're looking at beautiful things. And it is important to highlight just like being out in nature is a very grounding thing. Like the trees themselves like emit oil that calm your nervous system down. So just like go off and sit down for a couple of minutes in the snow. And I know that this doesn't relate to every person that may be like in a basketball court or inside or outside, but just obviously if you love basketball and you look around, like what a great opportunity that you're here right now doing what you love. And I also really highlight that it's not bad to be anxious. That's a very normal feeling to have, right? If you were sitting there cool as a cucumber, you would not be ready to perform. But what happens is sometimes our anxiousness or nervousness becomes unproductive. It becomes too much. Like we almost are out of our body. We're shaking. There's these other symptoms, our breathing increases. There's all these other symptoms that can happen. I give them these really like simple 4 toolkit ideas. Like when you're standing in line about to go and you feel all those things become too big, just start implementing one of these things. And it doesn't just go for the start line. It can be before you have a big test. It can be before you have your driver's license. It could be anything that you're doing that if you're really upset with your brother or mother, any emotion that is overtaking you, these are some simple tools to bring you back.
Yeah, no, those are great, right? And I guess the question I would have is how much time do you dedicate to implementing these approaches out of whatever block amount that you may have, right? So I don't know how the academy works, but if you think about a traditional education-based athletic deal, you've got 90 minutes to 2 hours during the season, right? How much time are you spending doing this? How long does it take to implement? What are some of the ways you've found to hack that so people are willing to give up their technical time to focus on some of the more mental aspects of it?
So as far as the school goes, I teach them 45 minutes once a week. So we have that time together that's structured in during the academic part of the day. So that's quite a gift that I get with them and they get with me.
And that's
Not in
just the mindfulness training. It's got nothing to do with skiing.
correct. Yes, correct. And obviously it's all tied together, but yes, it's
But
during the
it's
academic block.
essentially a curricular class that you have during the academic day, and then they ski after school.
Correct. Correct. So that's a unique thing that I have the pleasure of doing. But as far as that time basically gets me to convince them the importance of this, right? Like I try to impress upon them, like you're out there physically training every single day for hours, right? The difference between a any athlete and let's just say an Olympic athlete, the ultimate top is their mindset. And I try to impress on them the importance of taking it serious enough to practice it because that is going to be what brings them to the next level of where they're trying to get. So I am lucky I have the time to share that with them, but like even the kids that I only get for a smidgen of time, I always say to them a couple of things. One of them is I only wish that I had someone sharing these thoughts and ideas with me when I was your age. It took me 20 years of hurdles to get to the point of where I believe this much. And I also say, once you get into actually just like describing the emotion and like what it feels like, the next time one of those things come up, that's when you're going to have to say to yourself, okay, what are the tools I have? So it's, you can all be obviously imagine like me trying to teach middle schoolers this, like I get the number of eye rolls I get are like off the charts. So it's until you're in that situation, you can't quite understand it. But like the next time you're in that situation, just trust that you have this toolbox. So I think it does come down to like them buying in. And obviously I'm trying to teach it in a way that is connective and personal, and I'm like a jokester. I'm not like up sitting there with my legs crossed and in the meditative position. I'm like, you guys, if this is something you really want to do in your life, like this is going to be such an important tool to help you get to where you want to get. And then the reason why I label this the start routine is because I say to them, this is not just on race day. Like our brain creates neural pathways, and the more that we're doing something, the more it's going to just be ingrained in our mind and just become natural to us, right? So like it's up to you. Like you're going to do 100 of these turn. What do they say? You have to do something 5,000 to 10,000 times before it to become ingrained in your mind. So every time you go up the lift or every time you get to the start, just practice one of these things and see how it helps. And I have some kids that really buy into it and they really see success with it. And that's very validating for me.
I think part of the challenge to adding this to any practice is what I led with, right? It's like, how do you build it in? How do you create structure, routine, and systemize it versus, hey, here's a good idea. And I think as you mentioned, you're fortunate that you have this part of the academic day where you can build it in there and then you can tap back into it. So I think it's great that's the opportunity that's presented there and you get to empower and equip right? These young kids with the tools that they're going to be able to use outside of skiing, right? That's just the vehicle to figure out how to do life, but all these other things that you're giving them is what is going to serve them long term. What have you learned watching other people teach or coach that you've been able to steal and implement yourself? I think our default is to, in your case, go watch other Alpine instructors, but I'm always curious, like what you have learned by watching somebody approach a discipline that isn't yours, like maybe the swim coach, right? Or the English teacher or whatever, but something that you can point to and say, oh, I directly stole that from something that has nothing to do with skiing.
I think I'm a real like people person. I'm a real like I'm like an empath. Like I really read people's energy. And I guess I would say I really have learned a lot in the way that other coaches maybe react to things or the way that they present themselves, like up at the start or in the finish line. And I think we all have our different styles, but I definitely tend to be, I'm like a big cheerer, but I'm like a real like cheerleader. Like I'm always like very concerned with the kids' emotional well-being and social well-being. So I would say I observe a lot, and I when I see other people say they're like completely overreacting or yelling at a kid, like I in my coach training, I'm like, what I never want to see is a coach yelling at a kid. I just like if you're gonna work here and work for me, that is not going to ever work for me, right? So I guess observing maybe how calm and kind some coaches can be or how overreactive some coaches can be. It just helps me navigate the way I want to present myself and how I want to help educate my staff to present themselves. And I think what I would say is that is also my default, like also my stretch as a coach. Like I do get fired up and I do get excited and I want to meet kids where they're at, but I think I'm definitely more like of a mother hen than I am like you gotta be whatever. I guess I'm a big observer. And so I observe a lot of like energy and behavior.
Yeah, I think that is age appropriate for the group you're working with, and not to say that when they're older, yelling is more appropriate, but I definitely think at that age group, if that were the case, you're probably turning a lot of kids off to whatever it is you're trying to introduce them to. That's probably a great approach. What would you say in regards to being a mindfulness coach as well? And we talk about growth mindset, so I'm always curious, like what's something you've changed your mind on most recently, where I used to be dug in over here, and now after reflection and challenging that, I'm over here and it's purposeful and there's a why.
I think I'm always trying to grow. I've been doing this for a very long time, but I always try to have an open mind and grow from different experiences. I think honestly what I had just highlighted, I do want to continue to I want to meet each kid where they're at. And there are some kids that are like real aggressive and like really competitive at a really young age. And I do have some coaches that are a little bit more like raw. And as long as they're doing it gracefully and I'm like okay with it. But I do want to keep my mind open to making sure that I'm meeting the athletes for what they need to have the most success in the program, being open to another coach's philosophy or mindset as long as they're doing it in a kind manner.
Yeah, and I think that's the goal, right? How are we constantly reflecting on our failures and trying to figure out how to enhance what we do and give back to the people that are here to grow under our tutelage. And when we fumble and trip over ourselves, are we doubling down or are we like actually trying to reflect and learn from those things? And I think those are the challenges and the calls that we get. And I'll wrap up with this. Do you have a favorite failure that has informed how you now approach either the world or your coaching or your teaching or your parenting, where, wow, this was a seminal moment and here's what it did for me?
A failure. I was thinking about this a little bit. I guess I would say like the very first time I became a head coach, I took out a group and I just started skiing, and it was before I had worked with the age group. And I didn't stop a lot because a lot they don't obviously ski as fast as I am, or they like I'd be like, stop at this juncture, but they don't even know how to read, right? Like, that was from the very first day that I ever had this age group. And I lost a child because they went the wrong way. And I had the rest of the group, but this other little kid went the other direction. And and obviously, like, they were safe and fine, and I found them at the bottom, but they were pretty sad, and they ended up not coming back to the program for the rest of that year because they were so sad and scared. And I will never forget that moment as a coach, and it was a failure. I was, like, obviously so bummed. I didn't have the experience, I didn't know. So, I do feel like a lot of like, the safety checks and the things that I try to instill on for the other coaches is just that each one of these learning experiences has allowed me to better explain and prepare other coaches to not have to try to minimize these things to happen and to try to better understand where these kids are coming from. I was 23 years old. Like, I just I didn't have the learning to know. So it was a great big failure on my end and an aha moment. And one of the things that I had earlier read about was just like, what are you as a head coach, like, what was the hardest thing for you? And I would say being able to educate the other coaches and the staff in order to, like, I'm like managing 175 kids and all their parents and 30 staff. Like, I would say the hardest part that I'm constantly trying to dig deep and learn for myself is like how to best educate. And there's with the 30 coaches comes their own lives and their own schedules and their own things that are constantly we also have to help manage. I would say just continuing to refine that and learn and grow and try to educate the coaches that I'm working with. And obviously a lot of that has come from my own failures as a coach.
That's the deal, right? We can read as much as we want. We can take as many classes as we want until we decide to utilize our mistakes to fail forward, then we're actually getting in the way of our growth. I appreciate you taking the time today, Coach, to jump on, give us a little insight into what it's like from the lens of a ski coach and mindfulness instructor. Clearly, it's cold where you're at since you're bundled up inside. I'll let you get back to that. Hopefully, there's a fire going.
Yes, thank you so much.